The nowhere is a physical world that can only be accessed through dreams. It is a desolate and nightmarish realm that exists somewhere between sleep and waking. When you close your eyes at night, there's a transitional space, a threshold filled with dark mist where you feel both awake and asleep simultaneously, where any sense of direction is lost, and twinkling stars reveal themselves to be shining eyes watching you. Children contain something of value within them that's important to the nowhere, an everlasting life essence that can sustain the life of this world. Once you're permitted entry, your physical body disappears from the waking world to complete the journey. You're trapped among the monstrous residents, or you become part of the nowhere itself if you open yourself up to it. The rules of the nowhere are designed to make you feel small in every conceivable way. From buildings to food, the world's environment and items are incredibly large in size and scale. The gameplay itself reflects the powerlessness. You cannot fight back in any meaningful way. You can only run, hide, and hope the monsters don't notice you scurrying through spaces never meant for someone your size. The world is inhabited by equally gigantic human-like beings known as residents, grotesque and monstrous predators with inhuman abilities, body proportions, and nightmarish features, fueled by warped greed and other selfish motivations that manifest in terrifying appearances and abilities. Each resident embodies a different facet of adult authority taken to its most nightmarish extreme. The nowhere is a world built from fear, sustained by trauma, and populated by the corrupted remains of everyone who came before you. And the only way to survive is to keep running, keep hiding, and pray you don't lose your inner child along the way. Because in the nowhere, childhood innocence isn't just threatened, it's currency, it's fuel. And once it's gone, you become part of the nightmare that hunts the next generation of children who make the mistake of falling asleep. You play as multiple children trapped in this nightmare. Six in her yellow raincoat desperately trying to escape the Maw. Mono with his paper bag mask searching for answers in the Pale City. The runaway kid witnessing horrors Six never sees. And Lo and Alone trying to find their way out of the spiral together. Each child faces the same ordeal. In the nowhere, you are small, you are hunted, and survival means losing pieces of yourself you can never get back. The developers opted against creating a powerful protagonist, preferring to describe the gameplay as hide and seek rather than stealth, feeling that even the term stealth gives the impression of an empowered character. You aren't a hero, you're a child, weaponless and voiceless, forced to hide from adults who see you as either entertainment, food, or an inconvenience to be disposed of. Note that Little Nightmares thrives on ambiguity and environmental storytelling, so I'll be relying on widely accepted theories for some of the events in the games. With that out of the way, welcome back. My name is Wick, and today we're going to take a deep dive into how Little Nightmares explores childhood trauma. Very Little Nightmares is a mobile grid-based platform with each room being its own level. Released in May 2019, this prequel story takes place before the events of Little Nightmares, trapping you in the unknown and hostile mansion known as the Nest, where everything wants to see you dead. You don't know how you got here, or why you were traveling by balloon in the first place. The yellow raincoat you're wearing will become iconic, but right now it's just the only protection you have against a world that wants you dead. The Nest is a mansion on a cliff's edge where you end up meeting a strange kid in the white clothes called Six, though you don't know her name yet. You have a desire to escape from the Nest, but this doesn't stop you from helping other captives. This is the first indicator that separates you from what many children in the nowhere will become. You still have compassion. You still believe in helping others even when your own survival is on the line. Very often you join other children and gnomes to continue your journey, skilled at solving puzzles and identifying your enemy's weaknesses. The first monster you encounter reveals something deeply disturbing about the Nest. The craftsman is an old disabled man with long arms and reversed feet, sitting in a wheelchair making handcrafted dolls, and it's implied that these dolls are made from live children. While you free a child from inside a cage, the child later loses their life and becomes a doll due to being saved too late. This introduces a crucial element of childhood trauma that the series explores throughout: the helplessness of being unable to save others despite your best efforts, the guilt that comes from trying and failing. Next, you encounter the butler, a balding floating man with the gift of telekinesis, whose hands are bound behind his back by a lock. He works 24/7 to suit the Pretender's needs exclusively, most likely enslaved and controlled through threats of her power. The butler chases you through the mansion using his telekinetic abilities to hurl objects in your path, demonstrating that even the servants in this nightmare are complicit in hunting children. There's no one to trust here, no adult who will break the cycle and choose to protect you instead of pursuing you. But the horror of the nest comes from its owner. The Pretender is a young child, no taller than you, with pale skin, red lipstick smeared over her lips, pink blush on her cheeks, white hair that curls at the end. Unlike the lady and the thin man, who have calm demeanors, the Pretender is actively violent, often shown screaming in rage, obsessed with her dolls to such an extent that she dedicates entire rooms to include as many as possible in her daily life. Many rooms in the nest are dedicated to the Pretender and her dolls. TV rooms, tea rooms, a dining room with a very long table and many chairs. The Pretender likes to bring attention to herself, having a statue of herself in the entrance hall, various portraits hung all over the walls, and a throne-like seat that sits amongst normal seats in the TV room. She's introduced as a stereotypical, spoiled rich child, though a portrait in the main halls shows her with what is likely to be her parents. Some theorize that the hanging man from the first game is her father, since there is an image of him right on the wall adjacent to the family portrait. The Pretender represents the corruption of a child who likely experienced her own abandonment and neglect, responding by recreating the cycle with other children cast as her playthings. Should any dolls be out of place, the Pretender will not hesitate to lash out. She's seen dragging them out of the dining room and scolding them just before dragging them to the edge of the cliff to be ripped in two. Despite her temperament, she can be observed expressing some form of sadness, as she's seen crying alone on a bench where a destroyed doll lays in front of her. The Pretender doesn't just want companions. She wants control. She wants others to perform exactly as she dictates, and when they fail, she destroys them with the same casual cruelty that was likely shown to her. Near the end, you and Six are running from a monster together, but after you escape into a shed, you close and block the door behind you, leaving Six outside. This moment foreshadows the betrayals that define the series. Even when children work together, fear and self-preservation can shatter those fragile alliances in an instant. But then you encounter something worse. The Pretender is crying over the broken doll you accidentally destroyed. When she realizes you're behind her, she screams and immediately begins chasing you down the cliff. The Pretender doesn't just want companions. She wants control. She wants others to perform exactly as she dictates. And when they fail, she destroys them with the same casual cruelty that was likely shown to her. You begin to descend the slope, and despite the danger, you notice the girl in white clothes and save her from falling onto the rocks. In gratitude, Six drops a boulder on the Pretender, but this has little to no effect on her. The Pretender pounces on you, but in the end you both break off the rocks and fall into the sea. A few moments later, your yellow raincoat floats to the surface, and your braid flies out of your hood as you fall, revealing you're not who players assumed you were. The girl in the raincoat dies but manages to take the Pretender with her while Six escapes and implicitly wears her raincoat in memory. This is the first chronological death in the Little Nightmares timeline, and it's significant that it comes from another child. You tried to help, tried to free other children, and tried to cooperate with 6. Now she carries with her the first lesson the Nowhere teaches every child who enters it. Compassion and heroism gets you killed, while the survivor is the one who learns that trust is dangerous and self-preservation triumphs above all. The Nest explores childhood trauma through the lens of loneliness and the desperate need for companionship gone catastrophically wrong. The Pretender had everything materially, a mansion, servants, rooms dedicated to her desires, but she seems to be the only living inhabitant besides the gnomes in the living quarters, despite there being dozens of frames of other children, and even her implied parents hung around the place. Her parents are absent. Her only companions are dolls made from the corpses of children she's had trapped and transformed. If she manages to catch up to other children, she will make them vanish with the touch of her hands, showing that even her attempts at play result in destruction. While there are many theories about the Pretender's identity, I will highlight 2 that revolve around her name itself, the Pretender. The visual clues throughout the Nest suggest something deeply unsettling about what she represents. On one hand, the Pretender could be a child pretending to be the adult she desperately needs, perhaps mimicking an absent mother, trying to fill the void of parental abandonment by becoming the parent herself. Her lipstick is smeared across her mouth in the way children apply makeup when playing dress-up, lacking the precision of someone who actually knows how to wear it. Her white hair curls at the ends in a style that looks almost like a wig, too perfect, too styled, as if she's wearing a costume. She creates dolls from other children because she's recreating the family structure she was denied, casting herself as the matriarch of the Nest while still being too young to understand what that role actually means. On the other hand, the Pretender could be an adult who has regressed to a childlike state, reverting to the form of the child she once was in response to her own trauma. The infantile rage she displays when her dolls are out of place all suggest someone who has psychologically trapped themselves in childhood. Perhaps she was once a victim in the Nest herself, and rather than escape, she chose to remain, growing older in body while refusing to grow up in mind, forever playing the role of the spoiled child she either once was or wished she could have been. Either way, the Pretender represents what happens when the line between victim and perpetrator blurs so completely that you can no longer tell which came first, the trauma or the monster it created. In Little Nightmares 2, released on February 11, 2021, you play as Mono, a young barefoot boy wearing a brown paper bag over his head, who is trapped in a world that has been distorted by the humming transmission of a distant tower. He appears to be a noble, confident, well-meaning boy who is willing to go out of his way to help others, offering his hand to 6 and staying by her side despite her initial rejection of his assistance. The game takes you outside the horrors of the Maw and into what's beyond it. This is a prequel to the first game, and what unfolds here explains how 6 becomes the person who enters the Maw, but more importantly, it explores how trauma compounds, how trust shatters, and how children can become the very monsters they're fleeing from. You awaken from a dream of a door marked with an eye at the end of a long hallway, and your adventure begins in the wilderness next to a TV. The wilderness establishes that this world wants you dead. Traps designed not just for animals but for catching humans are placed throughout the forest, and bodies are abandoned everywhere with hordes of flies buzzing around them. The wilderness is a huge, overgrown forest where the hunter lives engaged in his mad craving for taxidermy. In addition to his dwelling and closet where he rips off animal skins, there are other houses in the wasteland which have long been destroyed and abandoned. You travel through this trap-infested forest before arriving at a creepy old house where you find rotting meat and mannequins that are most likely the taxidermied remains of unlucky humans. The hunter has several stuffed corpses propped up in chairs. The taxidermied family has a husband missing his arm with his head stuck onto what appears to be a mannequin piece sticking out of his neck. The wife no longer has a face, and her head is stuffed with wool, while the son has cotton wool spilling out of his eye. This is where the series begins exploring a different facet of childhood trauma, not just institutional abuse or neglect, but the horror of stumbling into an adult's private obsession with death. The hunter is a monster with a stocky physique and a large head covered by a burlap sack tied around his neck with twine, with a single eye hole. His coat is worn and roughly stitched together, with a cotton material bulging out from between the stitches. This could mean that the hunter himself is taxidermy. The hunter represents the adult who has completely surrendered to his basest impulses, who sees living things only as objects to be possessed and preserved, and children who wander into his territory are simply more trophies waiting to be mounted. Before you were presented with the truths about the hunter, you discovered the basement where you hear a musical tune. You eventually reach 6 playing with a music box. Seeing the fearful state she's in, you offer to help her escape, only to be turned down as she pushes past you and runs off. After jumping from the nest and surviving, 6 left on a raft, eventually ending up on the shore along the mainland in the wilderness. The hunter found her and locked her in a room in his cabin, with only a music box for entertainment, and she stays there for upwards of a month. The music box is something not consistently present throughout the game, but pivotal in 6's story. The music box represents childhood escapism. Its melody offers 6 a fantasy world where she feels safe, probably a song from her past carrying the weight of a lost time. But the tune's structure reflects her trap. 5 notes, then 3, forever reaching for a 6th that never comes, mirroring how 6 herself is always grasping for freedom that stays just beyond her fingertips. You chase after her to the room past the dining area filled with the taxidermied family. It is not until the hallway when 6 decides to trust you and you become a duo. 6's initial rejection of help is expected since she's been locked in the hunter's basement for a month, with only a music box for company, and the first person who comes to rescue her gets shoved away. This pattern defines your relationship. You persistently offer help, while 6 oscillates between accepting and rejecting it, never fully trusting, always ready to prioritize her own survival over partnership. Working together, you're able to escape the house, but alert the hunter who takes his shotgun and chases after you. With your speed, stealth, and partnership, you survive all of the encounters with him until you're cornered in a shed, and there you find a shotgun, and with the help of 6, you pull the trigger as the hunter readies to break in. The Wilderness chapter explores childhood trauma through the lens of captivity and the corrupting nature of comfort objects. 6 wasn't being actively tortured in that basement. She had a music box, which played soothing melodies and gave her a sense of control in turning the crank. But that month of isolation with only the music box for company did something to her, something that won't become clear until much later when the music box transforms from a coping mechanism into an addiction. You and 6 wash up on the Pale City, which is shrouded by mist and rain and strewn with old televisions. You enter a school with children inside, but they're actually living dolls known as bullies. The school is a tall, wide 3-story building with a clock in the form of an eye symbol at its very top, and there's a playground. The bullies have porcelain heads and are dressed in matching school uniforms. When you hit some of them in the head with a weapon, they crack open and are hollow inside, suggesting they are thoughtless. The bullies are malicious troublemakers who will attack you on sight and will even bully each other. They're loud, disobedient, and hyper. They've laid traps all over the school like buckets tied to ropes that will smash into their victims once they step on a fake board. But beneath their violence lies something more tragic. In the giant chess room, you encounter a half-destroyed bully tied to a pawn with his eyes closed, which led many to believe it might be a real human. Evidence that these porcelain shells may have once contained actual children. The teacher is the main antagonist of this chapter. An educator with an unusual ability to detect troublemakers and misbehavior is not tolerated in her classroom. The teacher is an elderly woman who wears a gray skirt, beige buttoned-up shirt, white socks, and black shoes. She's also relatively large. The teacher has the ability to extend her neck to great lengths to look at areas out of her reach. If you make noise, she will be instantly alerted and investigate where it came from. She can use her neck to lunge at you, and if she gets close enough, she will grab you with her mouth. There is a moment when you turn the lights off and the only thing that illuminates are the eyes of the teacher's portrait. She is always watching. Despite their violent nature, the bullies become stiff and fearful around the teacher, but they can still attack you under her orders. You eventually reach a room where a bully is leashed, wearing a dunce hat, and repeatedly drawing pictures of eyes everywhere with chalk. The imagery is devastating. A child chained and forced to draw eyes endlessly, the symbols of surveillance that dominate the nowhere, internalizing the constant monitoring that defines their existence. This emphasizes the way adult oversight feels constant and suffocating when you're young. The teacher seems to be well aware that her presence unnerves children and acts in a deliberately unsettling way to put them on edge. However, when the teacher isn't around, the bullies are excessively rowdy and destructive. They're terrified of her authority and freeze in obedience when she's present. But the moment she leaves, they devolve into violent chaos. Not all children get to be innocent, and oppressive systems don't create good behavior, just fear-based compliance that explodes into aggression the second surveillance lifts. To get through the cafeteria, you have to put one of the porcelain heads on so you go unnoticed. The significance of you having to do this to survive the institution reveals you must become indistinguishable from the mob, surrendering your face and identity to blend into what the system demands just to make it through the day. Even after removing the hollow porcelain head, the experience leaves its mark. You've learned that visibility means violence, that standing out invites attack, and that sometimes the only way to navigate hostile institutions is to temporarily become what they've made of everyone else. You and Six are separated when Six is captured by the porcelain bullies, but you save her and escape the long-necked teacher. Outside the school, Six finds her signature yellow raincoat. This moment marks her transformation into the character you knew from the first game, but it's significant that she claims this identity after escaping an institution designed to hollow out children and turn them into obedient shells. Together you reach the hospital where you encounter the mannequin-like patients, their detached living hands, and the doctor who crawls on the ceilings. The hospital is larger than the school and even expands underground. Like many other places in the Pale City, it looks ruined and abandoned with little light. The patients can be seen everywhere, and there are cells used to contain disobedient ones. But some patients are found in dark areas where they ambush living beings. Patients appear to be undead humans who have been dismembered or decapitated and had their body parts replaced with tanned, shiny mannequin parts and prosthetic limbs. Several patients are shown to be missing some of these parts altogether. The patients are trapped in bodies they've learned to despise. Every glance in a mirror reveals only imperfection and the failures of flesh, and in their desperation, they turn to the doctor, believing he can remake them into something they can finally stand to inhabit, begging him to carve away the ugliness until only wholeness remains. Live patients usually remain dormant when no one is in their presence, standing in the dark as statue-like figures, but always become hostile towards you on sight. If they're exposed to any form of light, no matter how bright or dim, they will freeze in place. The patients represent what happens when you internalize the belief that you need fixing. They arrive at the hospital of their own volition, convinced that something was fundamentally wrong with them, that the boredom and emptiness they felt could be cured through intervention. The doctor didn't have to kidnap them. They came begging for his services, and he obliged by literally dismembering their humanity and replacing it with artificial parts that look right but function wrong. This is the ultimate corruption of the caregiver-child dynamic. The child seeks help for their pain, and the caregiver responds by making that pain permanent, by transforming temporary suffering into irreversible damage while maintaining the fiction that this is all for the child's own good. The doctor's size is much more bizarre than previous antagonists you have encountered. His physical features look like a bloated cadaver with huge teeth, visibly poking out from a swollen pair of gums and pale, distended flesh that appears to have been inflated. It seems that since he's been on the ceilings for too long, his skin was dragged down by gravity, meaning even the one administering the harm has been deformed by the system he perpetuates. The doctor seems to study not only bodily changes but also psychology, as seen through the psych patients caged, brain scans throughout the facility, and the brain treatment center. There are many theories about the doctor, one being that he is not attempting to fix anyone but rather create the perfect person. It's heavily implied that the doctor is provided new bodies to treat at the hospital from residents like the hunter. In exchange for some of the corpses the hunter obtains in his traps, he provides any necessary materials to support the hunter's taxidermy obsession, such as the prosthetics found in the attic of his cabin. It is theorized that the hunter uses parts from the doctor to build a new body for himself. The institutions feed each other. The hunter captures and kills, the doctor dismembers and reassembles, creating a supply chain of trauma where every location in the nowhere supports and perpetuates the others. You manage to lure the doctor into an incinerator and may choose to either kill him or leave him trapped inside. If you don't activate the furnace, then you will gain an achievement which states it's crueler to let him live. Even mercy becomes cruelty in the nowhere, where living means continuing to perform your twisted purpose forever. You and Six then exit into the heart of the Pale City, leaving behind institutions where children are hollowed out and where people seeking help are transformed into shambling corpses, systems designed to take what makes you human and replace it with something obedient and broken. At first glance, it seems the entire city has been deserted for a long time. Garbage litters the streets, doors and windows are boarded up or broken, and clothes hang from clotheslines. The architecture itself shares something disturbing with the thin man you haven't met yet. The city shares his misalignment with crooked structure, suggesting this entire city suffers from his influence. Various televisions are seen with their electrical cords extending from abnormal places without ever being seen plugged into an electrical outlet. The Pale City emits a transmission that controls the city's inhabitants, creating TV-addicted viewers whose faces have been distorted from prolonged exposure to it. These viewers are perhaps the most human-looking monsters in the series. The viewers live life through the screen and cannot imagine a world without it. All those wonderful colors, sounds, and shapes, dancing before their eyes, mesmerizing them. When you encounter your first viewer, the viewer falls through the ceiling and soon gets up, immediately running into the next room where you and Six find the viewer with his head smashed into the screen of a television, seemingly dead. The Pale City explores trauma through the lens of addiction and dissociation. Adults who've surrendered so completely to escapism that they've had their faces erased, absorbed into the screens that promise them relief from reality. The viewers can get physically sucked in by the televisions, leaving just their clothing behind. Empty clothes in various poses throughout the city, marking where people once stood before the transmission consumed them entirely. Throughout your journey, you attempt to use televisions as portals to enter the hallway from your dream. Once you finally reach the door, you open it and release the Thin Man. The Thin Man is a tall, slender being in a black suit and hat which ominously hides his eyes. His stature is crooked and misaligned, with cheekbones and closed eyes that appear sunken, giving him a corpse-like appearance. The Thin Man possesses a glitchy, static aura that occasionally causes him to blur, twitch, glow a bluish color, and flicker whenever he moves. Six pulls you out just in time, but the Thin Man isn't giving up. He climbs out of the TV and begins pursuing you. You dash back up the hallway and hide under the bed, but the Thin Man snatches Six, leaving a glitching remains behind. The Thin Man exhibits patience and persistence throughout his pursuit. This is shown throughout the game through the Thin Man's leisured walk when he attempts to confront you. He never runs, never panics, just walks with the inevitability of someone who knows exactly how everything ends. After losing Six to the Thin Man, you find a remote, allowing you to interact with the TVs. This newfound power helps you traverse through the city to reach the signal tower, as you must properly phase through the TV monitor and teleport through to another one. The tune of Six's music box can be heard echoing from various TVs around the city, which becomes more notable as you approach some of the television screens, implying that the tune of the music box could only be heard by you and was broadcasted all throughout the Pale City by the tower specifically to lure you in. The signal tower wants you. It's been calling to you through every television, broadcasting Six's music box tune like bait, dangling in front of someone who can't help but follow. You teleport through a television screen that's being watched by a crowd of viewers and smash through it. You pause for a moment and then run for your life as the horde of viewers chase you down to kill you. The viewers who seemed docile while watching suddenly become violent when their screens are destroyed. The viewers continue to pursue you regardless of the number of functioning TVs on the shelf. Even their addiction has limits when you threaten the source of their comfort. Other viewers in the city are seen jumping off a rooftop, and throughout you have passed people that have hung themselves. The tower has brainwashed many to their own demise. Eventually, you confront the Thin Man on the rain-soaked streets of the Pale City. Discovering you have powers similar to the Thin Man's, you disintegrate him. He leaves no remains of his body behind, giving suspicion that although he was capable of physically interacting with the world, the Thin Man did not wield a physical body of his own. Shortly after defeating the Thin Man, you start to bend and distort the leaning buildings. You are able to pull the signal tower towards yourself without ever taking a step. You've just killed the monster that's been hunting you, but the victory feels hollow, and the signal tower looms closer than ever. The signal tower appears as a dark skyscraper with a beacon at its top located at the center of the Pale City. The situation inside the tower is supernatural, illuminated by eerie magenta lights as objects float around. A mesmerizing musical tune plays from nowhere and echoes everywhere. Furniture exists in random places, from armchairs and table lamps to deformed drawers. You navigate impossible architecture where up and down lose meaning, following the sound of Six's music box through pink-lit corridors that twist and fold. Finally, you reach a room near the top and find Six, who is now a distorted giant. Monster Six sits in a bright room with impossibly tall furniture, cradling her music box. You locate the hammer and strike the music box, and it's only after you take the first hit at the music box that Six will go into full rage mode and will kill you if she catches you. You are trying to break her of the nightmare-inducing influence of the signal tower's transmissions, but in reality you are breaking Six's heart. She chases you through the corridors with elongated arms reaching for you, and each time you return to strike the music box again, her resistance grows more desperate. She reacts the way the viewers do when you turn off their TV. They're dependent on them. They need them. You're not saving her from the signal tower. You're ripping her out of the only place where she doesn't feel pain, where the trauma can't reach her, where she finally has control. On the final hit of the music box, Monster Six is lying on the ground crying in agony from all the strikes from your axe. She's almost begging you to stop hurting her, but you once again strike the music box, effectively killing Six's illusion and reviving her in the nightmare. You believe you are breaking a curse, but instead you are shattering the only thing keeping Six together. As the signal tower begins to crumble, the interior begins sprouting an eye-covered mass which chases you and Six as you run for your lives and crushes you if you fall too far behind. You barely stay ahead of the collapsing nightmare, and when a ramp falls away, you make a desperate jump towards Six. She catches you, holds you for a moment, looks directly into your eyes without your bag obstructing the view, and suddenly, she lets go. Why does she drop you? On one hand, it could be that now you are no longer wearing a bag, so Six is able to see your face clearly, and what she sees terrifies her. You look like the Thin Man. This means that the Thin Man tried unsuccessfully to capture Six in order to prevent her from letting go of you, knowing full well that she betrays you in the end. But his actions ironically led Six to fear you and letting go of your hand as a result. On the other hand, you destroying the music box made Six feel attacked, her one source of comfort obliterated by someone she trusted, making your betrayal on that crumbling bridge not revenge but self-preservation against the person who shattered her only safe space. The betrayal explores abandonment trauma from both perspectives. You've just destroyed Six's coping mechanism, forcing her back into a reality where she has to confront everything the music box protected her from. Six is a survivalist, afraid of being bogged down by commitments to others. She had another friend once, the girl from Very Little Nightmares, who was killed in front of her despite Six's best efforts to save her. She remembers that event, and dealing with trauma led her to cling to the music box, and ultimately abandon those who she knows she can't help or can't help her. Every time she's trusted someone, every time she's tried to help, it's ended in death or betrayal, and now you've just hurt her worse than anyone else. At the bottom of the pit, where Six let go of you, you find yourself surrounded by pulsating flesh with eyes, and with nowhere left to run, you sit on a single wooden chair, surrendering to whatever comes next. Years unfold in isolation. Your body stretches taller, your limbs elongate, and the corruption seeps into you gradually until the child who sat down has transformed into the Thin Man, the spectral figure who's been hunting you through televisions all along. The innocence taken from Mono and the hatred built up inside is what powered the tower transmission. The door at the end of your recurring dream hallway finally closes with you inside it, completing a loop. You become the Thin Man because Six dropped you, and Six drops you because the Thin Man kidnapped her, and the Thin Man kidnapped her because he remembers being the boy she dropped. The cruelty embedded in your name becomes fully realized in this moment. Mono, derived from the word for solitary, for singular, for one standing apart from all others. Your deepest terror was always abandonment, and Six represented the first real connection you'd found in the nightmare. Someone who might break the pattern of isolation that defines your existence. Instead, she fulfills that fear perfectly. You plummet into the tower's depths to confront the exact thing you've been running from, sitting alone in darkness while bitterness takes root and years accumulate. The signal tower warps you as you age, the eye's influence twisting your body into impossible proportions, and the loneliness you feared becomes the only constant presence in your existence, your only companion through decades of imprisonment waiting for the cycle to begin again. You and Six created the tragic cycle by choosing to turn on each other, and if Six had trusted you despite recognizing the Thin Man in your face, or if the Thin Man had left Six alone, the cycle may have been broken. Both of them were blinded by their fears and made the wrong choice. If you found all of the collectible glitching remains, a final scene shows Six exiting the television portal and encountering her shadow self, Dark Six, who gestures to a pamphlet on the floor advertising the Maw, and her stomach suddenly growls with hunger, setting the events of the first game in motion. It is theorized that the shadow self is Six's evil counterpart that just left her true self, maybe the self that protects her innocence. She escapes with trauma compounded on trauma. She's been kidnapped, transformed into a monster, had her comfort object destroyed by someone she trusted, and then made the choice to abandon that person to a fate worse than death. Your companionship with Six ends exactly how the Nowhere ensures all childhood bonds must end. In betrayal, in trauma, in the creation of another monster who will hurt the next generation of children trying desperately to escape. Little Nightmares 1, released in April 2017, takes place after the events of Little Nightmares 2 in the chronological timeline, where you play as Six, awakening from a dream of a woman wearing a kimono and a no mask, equipped with only a lighter as you sneak through the bowels of the Maw, a massive, underwater iron vessel. The betrayal in the signal tower still echoes through you, the part of your soul torn away by the Thin Man, the music box Mono destroyed, the moment you let him fall. And now, you're somewhere new, somewhere worse, with a hunger inside you that wasn't there before. The Maw is a watercraft that resides in the middle of the ocean and can only be accessed by boat. It functions like a metal-plated ocean liner but is designed vertically like a skyscraper. Due to this design, it floats like an iceberg where only its funnel breaks the surface. The Maw is a manifestation of consumption, a physical embodiment of appetite taken to its most grotesque extreme, and you've just woken up in its lowest depths with a hunger that matches it perfectly. You start to make your escape. You venture through the deeper parts of the Maw, watching your surroundings while avoiding the leeches who want to eat you. You then climb up a makeshift rope and arrive at the children's prison. The prison is a very dark and lonely area and is located in the lowest compartments of the Maw. Various cabins are connected by vent shafts or thick metallic doors that you cannot open. There are very few encounters with other beings, and you spend the majority of your time in the prison alone. You navigate these dark corridors entirely by yourself, passing sleeping children who don't wake up, encountering the Hanging Man, whose presence suggests that some prisoners chose death over whatever fate awaits them in the Maw. Its name implies that the children who can be seen throughout the journey are being held there as unwilling guests. You're not a guest here, you're livestock, you're inventory, and the prison makes that brutally clear. You encounter gnomes, small, skittish creatures that either flee from you or passively observe your efforts. These tiny creatures will become significant later, but for now they're the only beings in the Maw who don't actively try to hurt you, though even they usually run away rather than offer help. You walk past the lavatory and the playroom, then into the prison's main hall, finally into a bedroom, where inside the bedroom you see the children sleeping, while a door at the back begins to open slowly. The janitor, a humanoid creature with abnormally long arms and a hat, passes through the room. You continue your escape, climbing up a wall of cages and narrowly crawling through the vents. As you proceed to move, you are stricken by hunger pains. A child tosses you a piece of bread to soothe your hunger. Whenever you eat, a flickering dark version of your world appears. Your shadow self watches every time you consume something, a constant reminder of what you lost in the signal tower, the missing piece of yourself that can never be filled no matter how much you eat. Hunger isn't just physical need, it's existential emptiness. It's the void left behind when part of your soul gets ripped away, and no amount of bread or meat or living creatures will ever make you whole again. You escape the prison and enter the lair, the second area you pass through where the janitor will be encountered frequently. This place appears to be the storage section of the Maw. The lair also exhibits different locations, such as a room to watch over different areas of the ship, and a center where the janitor wraps up children to be sent to the kitchen on a hook line. The janitor is the first monstrous humanoid you encounter on the Maw in a chase. The most striking feature of his head is how the top half of its skin sags down over his eyes, revealing the top of his skull and leaving him blinded by the folds of flesh. His mouth is stretched wide from ear to ear, and almost always wears a sinister grin while grinding his teeth. The janitor's arms and legs are disproportioned. While his legs are short and stumpy, his arms stretch to over twice his body length and can stretch even longer at will, with large hands and long, bony fingers that constantly twitch and grope at everything in reach. Although his title is the janitor, his main focus on the Maw is to capture children. He finds them crawling around, puts them in a prison, and then later puts them in meat sacks that are sent to the kitchen to be cooked. You begin experiencing hunger pains again. If you keep walking, you'll eventually find a piece of meat in a cage, which is a trap the janitor uses to capture children. The janitor closes the cage's door with you inside, using your hunger against you. The very thing that's supposed to keep you alive becomes the mechanism of your capture, your basic needs weaponized by adults. You awaken in the cage with several other captured children in the room as the janitor's long arm drags a cage with a child away. You watch the child being taken to their death, and there's nothing you can do. You're trapped in your own cage, waiting your turn. To escape, you knock your cage towards the ground and pop the top off. You break free through your own determination, through refusing to accept captivity, even when the system says you're powerless. As we have established, 6 is focused on self-preservation, and has been betrayed so you don't try to save the children, but you use their cage to assist in your pursuit of freedom. You escape the janitor's pursuit by jumping into a hatch that drops you in a dump area filled with luggage and shoes where you evade the shoe monster. Adult shoes are dumped here, another reminder that adults have been here before you, and whatever happened to them left only their shoes behind. They are a symbolic representation of the silent massacre that occurs at the Maw, where guests are dehumanized and consumed. As you make way back to the upper parts of the lair, you continue to encounter the janitor again in the toy room and the clock room. The janitor is also thought to be a hoarder of sorts, having a room full of dolls and other toys he collected over the years, and he has been seen interacting with, organizing, and keeping them in good condition. The toy room reveals something tragic. Even the monster who captures children once cherished childish things, once had interests beyond his terrible purpose, but those remnants of humanity don't save the children he's feeding into the Maw's machinery. After evading the janitor in the library, you distract him with the sound of a TV. Even here, even in the Maw, TVs hold power over the residents, the transmission's influence reaching everywhere. Once you jump out of the vent onto a pile of laundry, the janitor will burst through the door and immediately pursue you. You find yourself in a dead end where the janitor will try to feel around for you. He is blocked by a vertical door that is held up by a weak cage. You jump down and grab a piece of the cage to pull it free, which weakens it further, making the cage fully collapse, letting the heavy door slam down and severing the janitor's arms. A light sense of pity surrounds the janitor and his unhealthy figure, as sometimes he also looks like a victim of the Maw, blind, unable to properly talk, and deformed, all the elements of a tormented soul. He reveals the tragic endpoint of the abuse cycle. Theories suggest he was once a child who endured experiments in the doctor's hospital that warped his body and mind, and after escaping he found purpose on the Maw by becoming the very thing that once hurt him, capturing children and sending them to be processed by the twin chefs. His character shows how trauma can trap people in roles they never chose, transforming former victims into perpetrators who maintain the same systems that destroyed them, not out of malice, but because becoming part of the machinery feels safer than remaining its target. Following your encounter with the janitor, you find yourself in an area where hooks are seen carrying meat packages. The hunger strikes again, more intense than before, and you are forced to eat a live rat. You grab the rat and consume it while Dark Six is seen sitting on some nearby carts in the room to the right, watching you cross another threshold of desperation. The kitchen is the third area you pass through, and is home to the twin chefs. As its name suggests, the kitchen is a section within the Maw where the chefs cook and prepare meals for the hungry guests to chow down on. You also see children wrapped up in butcher paper hanging from hooks. The twin chefs are the main antagonists of the kitchen. They are a pair of obese humanoid monsters who are almost identical in appearance. Both have stubby legs and thick arms with pudgy fingers, the skin of which is heavily calloused. Theories have suggested that they either may have been one entity that separated or conjoined at one point as depicted in their portrait. The twin chefs represent adults who see children not as people but as raw materials to be processed. They operate an industrial kitchen where childhood itself is the ingredient being ground down, cooked, and served to satisfy appetites that can never be filled. A visceral metaphor for how harmful adults can systematically consume the innocence of the vulnerable under their control. The Maw operates on a cycle of consumption where everything feeds on everything else. Children feed the guests. Guests eventually feed future guests, and the whole system perpetuates itself in an endless loop. The twin chefs will chase you, and if you don't have time to run away, they grab you and add you to the meals. You escape the kitchen and climb outside the Maw's hull. You witness a procession of obese guests marching into the Maw from a separate vessel, where they gorge themselves on food. The guests appear as massively obese humanoid creatures with stumpy limbs and large misshapen heads. Their bloated faces appear to be almost deflated or melting. Despite their tattered formal attire, they do not appear human, as their facial expressions are horrifically disfigured. Some adorn themselves in porcelain masks, which seem to barely stretch over their bulging, unnatural true faces. Aside from eating, the only other thing the guests appear capable of doing is napping, showing that they are incredibly lazy when not wolfing down food. They are so self-absorbed in their endless consumption that they can't see children as anything beyond more things to devour, embodying how the adult world's insatiable hunger for more, like money, comfort, and status, leaves no room for noticing or protecting the vulnerable. Their fixation on catching you literalizes a child's fear of being swallowed up by an uncaring world. Not just physically consumed, but having your dreams, identity, and desires devoured by authority figures who see childhood itself as something to be processed and conformed into whatever shape serves adult convenience. After evading the guests, you come across one of the chefs as he descends from the elevator and you quickly hide in a bathroom. Eventually, you make it to the upper level of the restaurant where several guests appear behind sliding doors, culminating in a massive flood of guests as they pursue you. Shortly after, however, your hunger pain returns. You wander for a moment and encounter a friendly gnome offering you a sausage. This moment is the culmination of everything the kitchen and guest area have been teaching you about consumption. The sausage is made from children. You've seen the bodies wrapped in butcher paper. You've watched the chefs process meat in their grinding machines. You've witnessed the system that turns children into food for the guests. Your shadow self watches you cross the final threshold. You've eaten bread from another child's compassion. You've eaten meat from the janitor's trap. You've eaten a live rat out of desperation, and now you're eating another child. This escalation is a metaphor for how trauma normalizes cruelty through incremental compromise. Each act of violence you commit to survive makes the next act easier. Each boundary you cross to stay alive moves the line of what's acceptable, until one day you look in the mirror and realize you've become indistinguishable from the people who hurt you. The tragic reality is that children are prone to mirror the cruelty inflicted upon them. After witnessing the Maw transform children into food for guests, after being hunted and caged and treated as something to be consumed rather than protected, you repeat this cycle all over again. This brings us to Secrets of the Maw DLC, where you play as the runaway kid at the same time as Six navigates the upper levels of the Maw. Here, you are around the same size as Six, but unlike her yellow raincoat, you wear a blue garment with a collar around your neck and long slate blue pants, and you have a metal cuff with a broken chain wrapped around your right ankle. The cuff on your ankle marks you as property, as a prisoner who once tried to escape and failed, and now you're trying again. Your journey begins with a nightmare. You're swimming in water but then get dragged down deep below the water by a big arm and the hand grips you tightly before dragging you into the murky depths. You wake up from this nightmare in the children's room which served as a prison cell, gasping in the darkness with the phantom sensation of drowning still clinging to your chest. You leave and make your way down to the lower depths of the Maw, and you're descending into places even darker than where 6 went. Along the way, you follow a girl with a flashlight who is also trying to escape from the Maw, another child who decided tonight was the night to run. You both make your way past the Eye, that stone-turning sentinel, working together in desperate silence because speaking might alert the monsters. The girl mysteriously disappears, presumably killed, leaving only her flashlight behind. One moment she's ahead of you in the darkness. The next there's just the light, lying on the ground with no body and nothing to mark her passing except the tool she carried. You pick up the flashlight and use it to fight through the darkness. It becomes your primary defense against things that lurk in places where even the Maw's residents fear to tread. The depths is located at the very bottom of the Maw and appears to have formerly been used for housing, as there are several pieces of furniture scattered throughout, but it's now flooded. You must traverse through the depths while avoiding leeches and the Granny. The Granny is a monster that resembles an old woman with a physique that is very lanky. Her wrinkled face bears 2 dark sunken eyes and a wide grin full of crooked teeth, and her long dark gray hair is thin and sparse with the top of her head completely bald. Whatever she once was, time and isolation have reduced her to something that barely resembles human, something that has been left to rot in the sewers while the rest of the Maw functions above. Unlike other residents of the Maw, the Granny doesn't have a job or a clear purpose. Her isolated life within the depths seems to be only something that would be considered a life for a prisoner, left locked away and forgotten. Her long imprisonment has resulted in the Granny's extremely aggressive behavior. She will go to great lengths to make sure you do not escape her grip. Some believe she was once a powerful figure in the Maw before the lady, but was overthrown and sent to the sewers to die. Others believe she was once a resident of the Maw, but was banished for being too loving toward children, unable to control her powerful affection and accidentally harming them. The Granny lives in a large area flooded with water which cannot be drained, and she remains out of sight, making herself known only as a ripple on the surface of the water. Whenever the Granny pulls you underwater, you realize that she is giving you a hug. She's not just killing, she's embracing. She's trying to hold on to something after decades of having nothing and no one in the flooded darkness. The Granny embodies how isolation and neglect can warp someone's understanding of affection. Care without boundaries becomes suffocation, and holding too tight is still a form of harm. Her tragedy reflects a painful reality some children face. Adults whose own neglect taught them that love means never letting go recreate their trauma by smothering the children they're trying to protect because desperation and devotion have become indistinguishable in their minds. You climb up metal bars on pillars and jump onto boxes to twist pulleys and pull bundles of corpses out of the water, bodies wrapped in the same material that holds the children in the kitchen. You take fish from a bathtub filled with leftovers and throw them into the water to distract the Granny, allowing you to swim to safety. Her hunger is predictable, exploitable. The same desperation that makes her dangerous also makes her vulnerable to simple distractions. Eventually, she drives you onto one of the wooden platforms, cornering you with nowhere left to run and water on all sides. You turn on a TV and push it into the water, electrocuting the Granny and killing her. The screen sparks and the Granny convulses in the contaminated water, her body finally going still after who knows how many years of isolation and madness. You've just killed someone who was likely a victim long before she became a monster, someone who was abandoned in the depths and left to lose her humanity piece by piece until nothing remained but the need to hold on to anything that entered her territory. You walk upstairs and climb up a ladder on the wall, and after exiting the vent at the top, the janitor will quickly snatch you and lock you in a cage in a room with other imprisoned children, including 6. You are now the one that 6 witnessed to get dragged away by the janitor. Wrapped in butcher paper and ascending on a hook towards the kitchen, you break free and fall into an engine room where the infrastructure that keeps the vessel operational is maintained by the smallest inhabitants. The gnomes work hard throwing coal into a furnace. Several gnomes appear, and after you regain consciousness, you follow the running gnomes until you reach a room with a cracked door. The hideaway consists of dungeons and cellars where you first meet gnomes and learn that this is their refuge, and you must gather them to traverse through the hideaway while avoiding the janitor. Unlike 6, you are more than willing to work with others to escape, and you catch and hug gnomes to recruit them as allies. After you hug them, you can push heavy objects with them, or catch other gnomes in order to eventually recruit a large group, and use it to heat the furnace of the Maw. Eventually, you enter the gnomes' secret passageway and meet a large number of gnomes resting beside the fire, hypnotized by the light. The gnomes cast shadows of children, revealing that they were once innocent children who resided within the Maw just like you. You bid them farewell and leave through a vent. You can't save them. You can't restore what they've lost, and staying here would mean sharing their fate. You end up on top of an elevator, and as it begins to ascend, you sense danger below. The lady is inside, and with a slow, knowing nod, she looks up toward the ceiling. She knows you're there, she knows something small is crawling on top of her elevator, and she's patient enough to let you think you've escaped before she claims you. You regain consciousness on top of the elevator. The lady incapacitated you, and you've lost track of time. You grab a hook to swing into the ventilation hatch, then move forward along the corridor, carefully slipping past the lady as she plays with one of her porcelain dolls in a well-kept room. The lady's quarters, also known as the residence, is where the lady resides. Mannequins are scattered throughout the area, providing camouflage for her, and nearly all mirrors in this area have been damaged or have been covered. You must traverse through the residence while avoiding the lady and the shadow kids. The statues are keys, symbols of the lady's authority scattered throughout her quarters, and retrieving them means navigating a space designed to trap and petrify anyone who doesn't belong here. Shadow kids are the second minor enemies encountered, and they are childlike creatures created by the lady to guard her residence in the Maw. Their only distinct features are the white masks they wear on their faces and the shadowy shackles on their right legs. Like you, like every child in the Maw, they bear the mark of captivity. Similar to the patients from the hospital, these characters have a weakness to light, except they will die rather than just stand still if it is shined onto them. The masks worn by the Shadow Kids bear a heavy resemblance to the porcelain mask the lady herself wears. She's marked them as hers. The Shadow Kids represent the erasure of identity. The gnomes at least retain their physical forms, even if their faces are hidden. But the Shadow Kids are nothing but darkness held together by masks. Children reduced to whispers and laughter and malevolent intent. Eventually, you collect the statues to unlock the door. Then you walk through a broad doorway where heavy breathing can be heard from down the hallway, and you find a room with the lady looking into a mirror. Her unmasked face in the reflection appears gruesome and deformed. This is what she hides beneath the porcelain. Not beauty or power, just disfigurement and decay. A face she feels is so horrific she's shattered every mirror that might reflect it back to her. The lady's deformed face is exactly that of the granny's face. They're the same, or they will be the same. Time and vanity, and the nowhere's corruption creating identical ruins from whatever they once were. When you try to walk past, she notices you trying to sneak behind her. She screams an inhuman shriek, causing the lights to go out and the mirror to shatter. And when you recover, the lady is nowhere to be found. You saw what she didn't want anyone to see. You witnessed the truth beneath her mask, and now there's no mercy left for you. As you flee, the lady reappears with her mask back in place, and she stalks you. She's hunting you now, no longer content to let her shadow kids do the work. You soon discover an unlocked door leading into a dark hallway, and as you continue your escape, you suddenly levitate. The lady reveals herself and begins to distort you with magic. Your body stretches and compresses simultaneously, and you feel yourself being reshaped by forces beyond comprehension. As the room brightens up, the lady is nowhere to be found once again, and you have been transformed, waking up not as yourself, but as a gnome. The lady wasn't born a monster. The portraits and cycle of succession suggest she was once a girl like Six who killed her predecessor to claim the Maw's power and perpetuating a system. Her transformation of children into gnomes and creation of shadow children seems to be a twisted attempt to preserve what she lost, perhaps believing that trapping them in smaller, simpler forms protects them from having to grow up and face the same choice she did, or unable to remember that childhood innocence can exist without needing to be controlled and contained. The lady is the warning Six ignores and the future she's walking toward. What happens when you survive the nightmare by becoming it? When the scared child in the yellow raincoat grows into the woman in the mask? And when the only thing you remember about being small and powerless is the promise you made yourself that no one would ever make you feel that way again? You leave the residence and then go down a shaft where you make your way past the guest area. You navigate as a gnome now, small enough to slip through gaps you couldn't access before, hunched enough that you can hide behind objects that once came to your waist. As you wander around the guest area, you eventually make your way into a little room and discover a sausage on the ground. It's sitting there on the floor, seemingly discarded or dropped by one of the guests, and you approach it cautiously. Six enters the room. Her hunger is overwhelming, her shadow self watching from above, and she sees you standing there with the sausage. You're offering it to her, squeaking in your gnome voice, trying to communicate that you want to help, but she doesn't see a helper. She sees only a gnome, something living and available, something that might fill the void inside her that can never truly be filled. She consumes you, and the tragedy of the runaway kid's story is that your death goes unacknowledged, your sacrifice unrecognized, your journey unseen by the one person who was traveling a parallel path the entire time. Returning to Little Nightmares 1, your journey as Six continues after consuming the runaway kid. You're left with the taste of what you've done and the knowledge that the lady is somewhere above you, the woman from your nightmares who rules this vessel. Ahead lies an elevator that ascends to the only place left unexplored, the private domain of the Maw's mistress. The elevator doors open, and you step inside, ascending toward the lady's quarters where the cycle of victims becoming perpetrators will complete itself one more time. You follow the lady up into her quarters, which are strewn with broken mirrors, a sanctuary built from vanity and insecurity in equal measure. The lady is humming to herself while brushing her hair in front of a vanity. She's fixated on her appearance, owning various portraits and statues in her image, and although she can't look at her own face in the broken mirrors when regularly tending to her hair, she still owns intact mirrors that are hidden away elsewhere in her quarters to see her disfigured reflection in private. You creep behind her while she continues her grooming ritual, oblivious to the small figure in the yellow raincoat passing through her private space. But one wrong step, and she'll turn, and her powers will seize you before you can even scream. Once you have safely made it across the room into the lady's bedroom, you must jump onto the stand with the vase and knock it over. This reveals a key. The crash of the vase shattering is loud enough to echo through the quarters, but when you emerge, the lady has simply vanished, leaving only silence and the unsettling certainty that she knows you're here now. You finally find what you've been searching for, the mirror. This is one of the rare unbroken mirrors, locked away behind boards in a storage room as if even the lady feared what it might reveal. You approach the lady for the final encounter. She's waiting for you in a vast room, standing in the background, before vanishing the moment you get close. The lights dim and darkness floods the space, leaving you vulnerable and exposed. The mirror you're holding can't repel the lady without a light source, and the lady has no control over the light shining above you. The true source of the obscure moving light that aids you is implied to have been provided by the Maw itself, a living structure comprised of flesh eyes similar to the signal tower. The Maw wants you to win, wants the lady removed, wants whatever cycle she represents to end, so a new cycle can begin. You shine the mirror at her many times to defeat the lady with the unbroken mirror. Those are times that she must confront the truth beneath her mask. The final time, the mirror shatters from the blast and you are left in complete darkness. The only tool that could hurt her breaks in your hands, glass scattering across the floor, and for a moment there's only silence and the sound of your own breathing. As you awaken, you suffer another hunger pain. It strikes with overwhelming force, doubling you over, making everything else fade except the gnawing emptiness that's been growing stronger with every meal you've consumed. You slowly approach the weakened lady. You have no control over your movement now, your body responding to something deeper than conscious choice, drawn toward the only source of sustenance powerful enough to fill the void inside you. You bite the lady's neck, killing her. Your teeth sink into flesh. You tear away the life force that sustained the Maw for who knows how long. After 6 consumes the lady's flesh, a dark aura surrounds her as she slowly turns her back, her stance similar to the lady's when she is first seen in her nightmare at the beginning of the game. You're becoming what you destroyed, inheriting her position, and the Nowhere wastes no time in marking you as the new bearer of these powers. The game does not frame your killing of the lady as a virtuous act. It comes from the same place that killing the gnome came from. The same darkness that's been growing since you ate bread from another child's kindness, and has now consumed whatever innocence remained. You're not the first child to kill the lady, and you won't be the last. You then walk back through the guest area surrounded by a dark, magic aura, the black smoke trailing behind you like a cloak, marking you as something changed from the small, frightened child who entered the prison what feels like lifetimes ago. As you slowly walk, the gluttonous guests try to reach for you. However, the guests are strangled by your new dark powers as their life forces are absorbed by you. The guests fall to the ground. Their lifeless corpses are left behind as you make your way to the exit. At the end of the hallway, you leave the mall without a single look behind at the chaos, disappearing into the sunlight. You have succeeded in escaping the mall, but have arguably become as bad as the people on board to do so. You're free. You've survived. You have power beyond what any child should possess. But the cost was everything that made you different from the monsters you destroyed. Your journey through the maw completes your corruption. You enter desperate and hungry and exit powerful and hollow, having consumed the gnome who tried to help you and the lady who ruled over everything, absorbing the dark magic that will make you the next keeper of this nightmare factory that processes children into food and fear into fuel. The question hanging in the air is whether you'll use those powers to break the cycle or to perpetuate it elsewhere. In Little Nightmares 3, released in October 2025, you follow the journey of Lo and Alone as they search for a path that could lead them out of the nowhere. Trapped within the spiral, a cluster of disturbing places, the two friends will have to work together to survive in a dangerous world full of delusions and escape the grasp of an even greater threat lurking in the shadows. This duo is a big contrast to Six, who eventually betrayed Mono, or the girl in the yellow raincoat who died trying to help. You have someone you can genuinely trust. The two characters are Lo, a young boy who has been wandering the spiral trying to find a way home, and Alone, who is Lo's best friend and the one person he can always count on. Lo wears a raven skull mask and is equipped with a bow used to strike faraway targets, while Alone has pigtails and goggles, and is equipped with a wrench to hit down walls or work with mechanisms. Ravens throughout the spiral serve as omens of death and solitude. They guide you mechanically toward crucial items, swarm the monster baby in recognition of corrupted innocence, and their feathers form the umbrella that lets you traverse impossible spaces. But Lo's choice to wear a raven skull mask reveals something tragic. He's adopted the symbol most associated with melancholy and isolation across cultures. The bird from Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven represents eternal, mournful memory and loss. Like the ravens of mythology who carried messages between mortal and divine realms but remained forever alone in their duty. While Mono hid behind anonymous paper to disappear, Lo chose to become the Raven, a creature embodying both death and resilience. Lo is considered the main character while Alone plays a supporting role, so I will cover the game from Lo's perspective. You awaken from a dream of a mirror that has a reflection of your way out of the nowhere. Alone shows up to help you to your feet, and the two of you begin your journey. You step outside the ship that is now beached in the sand since the ocean has dried up. You are in the Necropolis, a mysterious desert, with strong winds blowing sand everywhere, creating a foggy hue of yellow. You both travel through the desert and climb up a stone wall to reach the destroyed city with petrified stone bodies all around. Monster Baby is a massive doll-like baby who is responsible for the fall of the Necropolis because she has the uncontrolled ability to turn living beings into stone with her eye that emits a bright light. You have a handful of encounters with Monster Baby as she plays around what she has now made her playground. She grabs oversized items like her rattle and crushes through a building to pull out a bell that she rings. The stone dwellers are basically her toy dolls that she created. The flashbacks begin. Monster Baby picks you up and drops you, which sends you into another space mentally. It's a brief glimpse of another time, where you're hiding from an approaching figure in a padded cell that you are locked in. You wake from being knocked out due to the far fall and continue through Monster Baby's playground. Monster Baby picks up a piece of a building and inspects it. You quickly hide behind objects as crows begin to attack her. She's overwhelmed, so she puts down the building and runs off. Monster Baby embodies how prolonged childhood isolation can warp natural desires for play and connection into something monstrous. The baby's porcelain face, cracked and filthy from years alone, reveals a child whose desperate loneliness has grown so destructive that every attempt to find a connection results in petrification, turning potential companions into stone figurines who can't leave. A representation of how children who've been denied connection for too long may inadvertently destroy the relationships they crave most. After safely making it past Monster Baby, you come across a mirror where you travel through it while pulling Alone with you. Her emergence from the mirror causes it to shatter. You find yourself in the Candy Factory, a massive industrial facility where the herd are transported on a mechanical pulley system to make candy. The herd are obese creatures that are not only seen working in the factory, but are consumers at the carnival later in the next chapter. They are similar to the guests in the first game, gluttonous overconsumers. This huge factory is run by the supervisor, a woman with multiple arms, wears a skirt, and rolls on wheels, who oversees production of an endless supply of sweets, and from her nest of surveillance monitors she watches over the endless maze of machines ready to grab anyone out of place. The green hue of the factory hides the bright red sludge that is being pushed into the machinery that you see splattered on the floor throughout. It is also implied that the herd is worked to death and then turned into meat, like at the Maw, being processed like cattle. The TV transmissions continue to have a strong hold on creatures such as the herd. The hypnotizing nature of it keeps them in their routine of working in the factory. You turn off the supervisor's camera system, enraging her, causing her to hunt you down. She exposes her true form by pulling herself out of her skirt, revealing a spider-like form. She chases you through the pipes and you lure her into a hydraulic press. You crush her, using the factory's own machinery against its overseer, turning the tools of production into weapons of rebellion. The supervisor could represent the nightmare of witnessing your parents consumed by work. Their 6 arms a grotesque literalization of adults stretched too thin by responsibilities. And for Lo, he may embody the specific nightmare of watching caregivers work themselves to death while you stand helpless. Learning early that adulthood means being slowly transformed into something monstrous by the pressure to never stop working, even as your humanity gets ground down in the same factory machinery that processes candy and children with equal indifference. you and Alone go through another mirror, and Alone once again shatters it and is unconscious for several seconds after emerging. The pattern continues, and each time she takes longer to recover from passing through, as if the mirrors are rejecting her presence or draining something vital from them with each transit. You find yourself in a gnome sanctuary again, but this time it is empty. There is only one gnome sitting in front of the fire. You and Alone continue through the facility and make your way to the carnival, which is run on a giant wooden airship. This janky collection of carnival rides and games is host to those members of the herd who have survived the candy factory. For the herd, it's not all fun and games. They are lured here with candy and distracted by the flickering lights, so no one notices when their members are ruthlessly dragged off to a sinister end. The herd represents complicity in the cycle of exploitation. They're simultaneously victims and perpetrators, lured to the carnival by promises of endless entertainment only to become mindless livestock, processed by the system they came to enjoy, so consumed by their own desires that they've become oblivious to the suffering around them. Willingly participating in a carnival that commodifies children as performers while the herd themselves are being fattened up to become the next meal, exposing how adults who prioritize their own desires over the welfare of children become part of the machinery that devours both generations in an endless cycle where everyone is eventually consumed. You must avoid both the wandering herd members and the malicious puppets who operate the carnival stalls. These small wooden creatures violently attack anyone who disrupts their operations. The puppets all serve the kin, the eyeless ringmaster who runs the carnival. They capture children for him as well. The puppets have similarities to the bullies from the second game, so they may also be transformed from children that became stuck in the nightmare. You venture through the carnival and make your way past members of the herd that are partaking in festivities such as bobbing for apples and hitting a piñata made of human parts. Continuing through the carnival, you stumble upon the lair of the kin and mini-kin. They capture children and force them to perform circus acts. The kin commodifies them, turns them into entertainment, and forces them to perform for the same adults who will eventually consume them or discard them when they are no longer amusing. During your time in the lair, kin cuts off a chunk of a herd member and feeds it to mini-kin. The kin and mini-kin represent the trauma of parentification and forced maturity. When caregivers are too consumed by their own obsessions to actually parent, children are thrust into adult roles of performing, entertaining, and serving, left lonely and invisible, except when they're useful. And mini-kin's role as the kin's detachable assistant literalizes how children forced to grow up too fast become extensions of adult dysfunction rather than individuals deserving protection, perpetuating a cycle where the neglected child becomes the neglectful authority who demands the next generation perform the same exhausting dance. You alert them so they both chase you through their lair. Eventually, you and Alone are cornered, but Mini-Kin is only able to capture you. They put you in a cage hanging in the air next to a cage with a gnome in it. You get Kin's attention so Alone can sneak by and let the gnome free. The gnome is enough of a distraction for Alone to free you as well. You both continue through the lair, but Kin catches up to you and chases you. You discover a hot air balloon that transports the goods, such as the herd meat between the facilities. Mini-Kin jumps on the hot air balloon to try to stop you from escaping, but you and Alone turn on the balloon's flame, burning Mini-Kin to ash. Unfortunately, the balloon is struck by lightning and crashes, knocking you out again. You are in the padded cell once again. You hear the scary figure coming toward your cell, so you hide your drawings in a chute and hide under the bed. Once the threat is gone, you recover them alongside a doll that resembles Alone. Back in the spiral, you wake up at the front of the Institute, a decrepit building that resembles the place from your memories. It has been overgrown with carnivorous plants and is patrolled by nurses. You and Alone make it to the same cell from your flashbacks. You discover the drawings and doll. When you touch the doll, the decrepit ruins of the Institute briefly return to how it was in your flashbacks. The doll is the window to the original facility. Anything outside of the doll's orbit is still the old, decrepit, overgrown Institute. You use the doll to traverse the Institute until you're chased by the hypnotist, a giant resident who has long limbs that stretch through the whole Institute and eyes on the palms of his hands, representing his constant, invasive scrutiny of his young patients. You continue through the facility and eventually reach the hypnotist's office where therapy sessions once took place. You slowly touch the bed, as if this is a place you remember, a room that should have meant healing, but instead became something darker. Candy is supposed to be a child's reward, a simple joy that brings comfort and happiness, but here the hypnotist weaponized it, luring children with sweets thought to be laced with something sinister to manipulate their minds. The same candy from the factory that hooks the herd and children now twisted into a tool of control rather than delight. The hypnotist continues to chase you, slithering its massive arms through the hallways and peering its head into the building as it crushes the Institute around you. You want to teleport through the mirror to finally escape this nightmare, but Alone refuses to enter, allowing the hypnotist to attack you. For the first time since you met, Alone hesitates at a mirror, sensing something that you don't, knowing in some way that crossing this threshold will change everything. The hypnotist tries to destroy the room to crush you, and by doing so he accidentally lets gongs drop from above, which you use to briefly stop the hypnotist's attacks, allowing you to shoot the eyes in his hands. Both his arms are now useless and crushed under falling rubble as the hypnotist's face falls on the floor. Alone smacks his glasses with her wrench, and you deliver the final blow by shooting him in the eye one last time. Alone holds on to you as you all fall, always trying to protect you from what's to come next. Knocked unconscious from the fall, you drift through a final memory, cuddling your doll in the Institute, then drawing with Alone, and the truth crystallizes in this moment. Just as Six's music box offered her a fantasy world where trauma couldn't reach her, Alone became the friend your mind created to survive the unbearable reality of abandonment. Not a delusion born from madness, but a psychological tool your psyche manufactured because being truly alone in the Institute was worse than any monster the Nowhere could conjure. Back in the spiral, you awaken next to the fallen hypnotist and the mirror from your dream. Alone is still reluctant to enter, but you pull her through, only for her to be ejected as the mirror breaks. Now you're left behind on the other side, and Alone vanishes entirely, proving she was never real. In the final scene, you're in a room with a window from your dream trying to repair a shattered mirror in hopes of getting Alone back. The room around you is both familiar and decayed with torn wallpaper, moving boxes, and creeping vines that hint at a world that isn't quite safe or whole. The Institute embodies the trauma of abandonment that defines your journey. The padded room flashbacks suggest you were left in a psychiatric facility where isolation is all you knew, and whether this institution was real or a metaphor for your mental entrapment, it represents the cage that forms around children who are placed somewhere and forgotten. You're trapped not just by the building, but by the knowledge that the people who should have protected you chose to leave you there instead. And even after physically escaping, the psychological prison of that abandonment follows you everywhere, which is why you desperately try to reconstruct the portal back to the Nowhere, rather than face a reality where you're still fundamentally alone. Little Nightmares 3 explores trauma differently than previous games, where Six and Mono faced external horrors that corrupted them into perpetuating the cycle. Low faced internal ones that forced him to fracture himself just to survive. The monsters weren't just monsters. They were manifestations of his distorted trauma, which explains why the monster baby and the hypnotist are significantly larger than anything seen before in Little Nightmares. But here's what makes Lo's story fundamentally different. He broke the cycle by refusing to become cruel. Six survived by consuming everything around her, becoming the predator she once fled from. Mono survived by becoming the thin man, trapped in an endless loop of abandonment and revenge. But Lo created alone, a companion who was kind, protective, and helpful. Instead of internalizing the hypnotist's cruelty and becoming abusive himself, instead of turning his pain outward and hurting others, he imagined something better. He survived the Institute not by becoming like his tormentor, but by conjuring kindness in a place designed to destroy it. That act of creating compassion instead of perpetuating cruelty is what allowed him to escape the nowhere when Six and Mono couldn't. And that's the Little Nightmares games in its entirety. A game series that shows us exactly what happens when children are trapped in systems that see them as fuel rather than people. We watched the girl in the yellow raincoat die showing compassion. We watched Mono get abandoned for trying to help. Six consumes everyone in her path to fill a void that can never be filled, and Lo loses his only companion to return to a reality he's not ready to face. The title Little Nightmares works on 3 levels. First, it refers to childhood fears, the terror of being small in a world built for giants where every adult is a potential threat, and every shadow might contain something that wants to hurt you. Second, it refers to how the adult world can see children, as little nightmares, as inconveniences to be managed, as resources to be consumed, as vermin to be eliminated. Third, and most devastatingly, it refers to what children can become when they're raised in nightmares, little versions of the same monsters who hurt them, perpetuating cycles they didn't start but can't seem to stop. The game was originally called Hunger because consumption is central to its themes. But Little Nightmares captures the transformation. Children don't just get consumed by the nightmare, they can become nightmares themselves. The nowhere feeds on hopelessness, on the belief that this is just how things are, but every time you choose differently, you prove it wrong. The runaway kid worked with gnomes instead of abandoning them. The girl in the yellow raincoat freed other children despite the risk. And Lo's escape proves what the nowhere doesn't want you to know. The cycle only breaks when you refuse to accept that becoming a monster is the only way to stop being a victim.